There was a night, I remember it exactly, when I sat at the edge of a bed in a hotel room that cost more per night than most people earn in a month, and I felt absolutely nothing, not peace, not satisfaction, not even exhaustion, which at least would have told me I'd been somewhere, done something that required effort. Just nothing. A flat, white, clinical nothing, like the inside of a room that's been professionally cleaned after something terrible happened in it. Sanitized, emptied, all evidence of life removed. The view outside the window was extraordinary. City lights for miles, towers I could probably name the architects of, systems I had touched with my decisions still humming below, invisible and operational, like organs in a body that had forgotten it was supposed to feel. I sat there and I thought, I won it. I actually won it. And then the quieter, more honest thought came, won what? I built something before most people had finished figuring out what they wanted. I built systems. I built schedules. I built rituals for productivity and frameworks for performance, and a version of myself that was extraordinarily effective at executing on almost everything. I pointed him toward, I built a reputation. I built a calendar so full there was no white space anywhere, not because I was careless, but because white space felt like waste, and waste felt like failure, and failure, well, we'll get there. I built an identity around not needing rest, not needing comfort, not needing anyone to slow down and check on me, because checking on me would imply I wasn't managing, and managing was the entire architecture of who I believed I was. I built a life that looked, from the outside, like the answer to every question a young man asks when he's lying awake at 14, promising himself things will be different when he's older, when he has power, when he has resources, when he has options. I built the options, and I sat in that hotel room and felt nothing and understood, slowly like a tide coming in rather than a wave hitting, that I'd been building the wrong thing for a very long time. Here's what I learned about ambition, that nobody tells you when you're hungry for it. Ambition is not a problem. It's not a flaw to be corrected or a wound to be healed. Ambition, properly held, is beautiful. It is the engine of transformation. It is what builds hospitals and writes symphonies and sends light into places that were dark. I am not standing here to apologize for wanting. I am standing here to confess what I did with the wanting. I let it eat everything. I let it become the only language I spoke fluently. Achievement, output, results, forward momentum. Every relationship assessed, not consciously, not cruelly, but assessed nonetheless for what it contributed to the project of becoming. Every moment measured against its opportunity cost, every stillness treated as a symptom to be cured. I thought efficiency was respect. I thought my ability to function without complaint was a form of love. I was wrong about almost all of it. Wait, before you scroll, I need you to hear this part, because I know who is watching this. I know because I was you. I know the particular exhaustion of being someone who has it together. I know the weight of being the one people call. I know what it costs to be reliable, capable, available, excellent, and to do all of that while quietly, privately becoming a stranger to yourself. You are not as fine as you are presenting. I say that not as a diagnosis, but as a recognition. As one version of this story speaking to another, the high-functioning person's loneliness is a very specific kind of loneliness, because it is invisible, because you have made it invisible, because you learned early that visibility was risk and need was weakness, and asking was an admission of something you could not afford to admit. I learned it young, the way you learn things when you're young, not from a lecture, not from a book, but from pattern, from reading a room, from the accumulating evidence of what got rewarded and what got punished, from understanding before I had the words for it that the version of me that performed was safer than the version of me that felt. So I became the performer. I became extraordinarily good at it, and then I sat in a hotel room with nothing inside, and I understood the performance had continued so long I had almost forgotten there was anything behind it. Tell me something. When did you last let someone see you actually struggling? Not the polished version of struggling, where you mention the difficulty in passing and then immediately demonstrate that you've already processed it and moved forward. Not the social media version, where the vulnerability is curated and the caption is hopeful and you've already arrived at the lesson by the time anyone reads it. When did you last let someone sit with you in the middle, in the part that doesn't resolve quickly, in the part where you don't know what you're doing and you're not sure you're going to be okay and you don't have a strategy yet and you're just lost? I had not done that in years, maybe longer, maybe ever, depending on how honestly I'm willing to. Because there's a version of sharing that is actually armor. You share the edited version. You share the story with the ending visible, with the meaning already extracted, with the emotional charge diffused. You share in a way that invites admiration rather than closeness, in a way that keeps you elevated rather than known. And you tell yourself this is intimacy. You tell yourself you're being open. You tell yourself the wall isn't there because you keep talking about your feelings, but the wall is not made of silence. The wall is made of managed disclosure. The wall is made of letting people close enough to feel warmth, but never close enough to find the cold places. I built that wall brick by brick. I laid each one myself. I was proud of the construction. She didn't knock it down. I want to be clear about that. This is not a story about rescue. This is not a story about a woman who saw through me and fixed me and made me whole in the way that movies promise someone will make you whole. That story is a lie, and it is a lie that has cost both men and women a great deal, because it teaches you that love is the arrival of someone who completes the incomplete you, and so you spend your life searching for completion instead of building it, and you evaluate every person against whether they fill your gaps, and that is not love. That is procurement. She didn't complete me. She did something quieter and more difficult. She stayed present. That sounds like nothing until you understand what presence actually costs and what its absence had actually done to me. I had surrounded myself for most of my adult life with people who related to me through my usefulness. Advisors, colleagues, partners in various senses of the word, people who were genuinely engaged, genuinely invested, some of them genuinely warm. But the engagement was always, at its foundation, engagement with what I could do, with what I was building, with the output, and I had accepted this as normal. More than that, I had cultivated it. Because if people valued me for my output, then my value was guaranteed as long as I kept producing. It was a controllable equation. Produce well, be valued. Produce well, be safe. Produce well, never have to discover what the alternative looks like. The terror. And it is a terror, even if it doesn't announce itself with that name. The terror was what happens if you stop producing. Who comes to sit with you when you have nothing to offer? Who stays in the room when the room has gone quiet and you have no momentum to speak of, no vision to share, no results to report? I did not know the answer. I'd been too afraid to find out. Look at me for a second. I want to describe something to you because I think you might recognize it. There is a kind of person, and I was this person, and you might be this person, who is deeply, genuinely loving toward others, who shows up for people, who gives time and attention and effort generously, often more generously than is wise, who is, by most external measures, a caring person, and who simultaneously has no idea how to receive care. Someone offers comfort, and you redirect to solutions. Someone expresses concern, and you reassure them immediately, reflex fast, before they've even finished the sentence. Someone asks how you really are, and you smile, and you give them the version that is true enough to feel honest, but edited enough to not burden anyone. And you believe, you genuinely believe, that this is kindness, that protecting people from your weight is generous. What it actually is distance. What it actually is a decision maybe made so long ago you've stopped experiencing it as a decision, that you are not allowed to be the one who needs things, that your needs are somehow larger or less valid or more dangerous than other people's needs. That asking will break something. That need will drive away the people whose presence you need. That is not a personality, that is a wound, and I had built an entire architecture of achievement over that wound and called the architecture success, and it was genuinely successful. It was impressive by every conceivable metric. And underneath it was a person who had never learned that he was allowed to need something without it costing him. She asked me once, we had been talking for a long time, the kind of talking you do late at night when the performance has worn thin from the day and you're too tired to maintain the version and you find yourself speaking more directly than you intended. She asked me, what would it feel like if you just didn't have to be impressive right now? I laughed first, the way you laugh when something cuts close. And then I sat with the question, and I noticed something uncomfortable happening in my chest. Something that felt like a door I hadn't opened in a very long time, slightly ajar. A thin line of light coming through that was simultaneously warm and frightening. What would it feel like? I didn't know. I genuinely did not know. I had been impressive for so long. I had confused the performance with the person. I had confused what I could produce with who I was. I had been optimizing the instrument and neglecting the musician, and the musician was in there somewhere, exhausted and unheard, playing the same pieces over and over for an audience that applauded but never asked if the musician was happy. Here's what I learned about the relationship between achievement and identity. When you make your worth conditional on your performance, and I don't mean you decided this, I mean it was built into you before you had the language to question it, you create a self that has no stable ground. Every success is only the temporary proof that you have not yet failed. Every failure is not an event, but an unmasking. The fear is not, I made a mistake. The fear is, I am a mistake. The fear is the total revision of what you're allowed to believe about yourself. And so you work. You work with a ferocity that looks like passion and sometimes is passion, but is also underneath desperate maintenance. You are maintaining the conditions under which you are allowed to feel okay about yourself. You are running hard enough that you never have to stop and sit with the question of whether you are enough without the running. I was running. I was running beautifully. The form was excellent. The pace was excellent. I was moving in a direction that looked from every angle like forward, and I was exhausted in a place so deep that rest didn't reach it. Don't deny it. I see you in this. I see the way you're nodding, or the way you've stopped, mid-scroll, because something in this caught you in a place you don't usually let things catch you. You have been excellent for a long time. You have been reliable. You have been the one who figures it out. You have been so consistently capable that people have stopped asking how you're doing the way they ask people they're worried about. They ask you the way you ask someone who you already know is fine, casually, rhetorically, because the answer is always fine. You've made yourself easy to overlook because you've made yourself impossible to worry about. And somewhere under the capability and the management and the forward momentum, there is a version of you that is quietly, patiently waiting to be asked a different question. Not how's the project going or what's next or what are you building toward, but the version of you that is waiting for someone to sit down, slow down, look you in the eyes and ask, how are you really? Not the version, not the performance, you. She asked me that question in different ways over many conversations, and the first several times I gave her the managed version, and she received it without judgment but also without being fooled. She would just wait. She would sit in the quiet after I finished the managed version. And she wouldn't fill the silence with reassurance or move us along to something easier, and after a while I understood that the silence was an invitation, that she was holding space for the version that came after the managed version, that she wasn't going anywhere. I didn't know what to do with that. I had been surrounded by people my whole life. I had not felt received in a very long time. There is a difference. I know that now. Here's what I learned about the difference between being loved and being valued. Being valued is conditional. It moves with your output. It is warmest when you are performing well, and it cools, subtly, without malice, but perceptibly when you are not. Being valued is real. I do not dismiss it. But it is not the same as being loved. Being loved is, and this is something I had to learn to believe, which tells you something about how long I had been operating without it. Being loved is when someone's regard for you does not change shape, when you stop producing, when you are tired and you admit it, and the room doesn't change, when you are uncertain and you say so, and you are not less in their eyes because of the uncertainty, when you fail, not fail at something peripheral, but fail at something central, something you had organized a part of your identity around, and someone remains interested in you, curious about you, present with you, not in spite of the failure but through it, as if your failure changed the texture of the conversation but not its value. I had not experienced that as an adult. I had experienced admiration. I had experienced loyalty, which is close but not the same. I had experienced partnership, but to be known in the uncomfortable places, in the places where the performance drops and what's underneath is neither impressive nor heroic, just human, and to be met there with continued presence and genuine warmth. That was new. That was, I will not overstate this, one of the most frightening things that had ever happened to me, because here's what intimacy requires that achievement does not. Intimacy requires that you stop controlling how you are seen. With achievement, you can manage the narrative. You can select what is visible. You can construct with tremendous skill and effort a version of yourself that is consistently impressive and consistently coherent and consistently moving in a direction people can respect and follow. You are the author. You control the edit. Intimacy dismantles the edit. In real closeness, over time, people see the discrepancies. They see the gap between the public coherence and the private confusion. They see the moments where the confidence that looked effortless is revealed to have required enormous effort. They see the small failures. They see the irrational fears. They see the things you're still carrying from years ago that you haven't put down yet. And the terror is, what if they see all of that and revise? What if the intimacy that feels like safety is actually vulnerability? And what if the vulnerability is exploited, or worse, what if it simply changes how they see you permanently, the way a photo you can't delete changes a story? I had been afraid of being known my entire adult life. I had built an empire partly to avoid ever having to be known, and she kept showing up. She didn't push through. I want to be precise about this because the precision matters. She didn't push through the wall. She didn't dismantle it strategically. She didn't perform some feat of emotional intelligence that removed my defenses. She just kept sitting on her side of it, present, unhurried, genuinely interested, occasionally honest with me in ways that were clear but not punishing. She told me once, "You're very easy to be around and very hard to actually reach." She didn't say it as an accusation. She said it the way you observe a fact about weather, clearly, accurately, without drama. I thought about that sentence for 3 days. I thought about it in the space where other people might have thoughts about their work or their plans. I kept coming back to it the way you come back to a door in a dream. It's always there, and at some point you have to decide whether to open it. I know you're easy to be around. Are you hard to actually reach? Here's what I learned about the prison of having it together. The prison is comfortable. That is the first thing to understand. It is not a prison that feels like a prison from the inside. It feels from the inside like security, like you have built something solid, like the ability to manage, to function, to produce without complaint or visible strain. This is protection. This is how you stay safe. This is how you remain necessary and therefore how you remain. The prison is comfortable, and the prison is also a choice. And the choice is so old that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels like personality. It feels like who you are. It feels like, that's just how I am. I don't really need much. I'm not very expressive. I process things on my own. I'm better at giving than receiving. Every one of those sentences might contain a kernel of truth, and every one of those sentences is also a rationalization of the decision to remain unreachable. Getting out of the prison is not dramatic. I want to be honest about this. There was no moment of breakthrough in my story. There was no cathartic release. No single conversation that unlocked everything, no morning when I woke up and was new. There was just a slow, uncomfortable daily practice of choosing differently. The day I admitted I was tired without immediately adding, but it's fine and here's my plan. The day I said I don't know in a conversation where I normally would have performed certainty. The day I sat with discomfort instead of immediately converting it into action. The day I asked for something I needed and stayed in the exposure of having asked instead of walking it back. The day I let someone see me cry. Not because I decided to be vulnerable as a strategy, but because I was sitting with her and something moved through me that I couldn't outrun. And she was there and I let it be visible. She didn't react the way I had feared. She didn't revise. She moved a little closer and she was quiet and she was there and the world continued. I had been afraid of that moment for 20 years and the world continued. I want to talk about what I had been building, not the work, the internal architecture, the structure that was supposed to make me safe. It was an altar, actually. I can see it clearly now. I had been building an altar to a version of myself that did not need comfort, did not need witnessing, did not need to be uncertain in front of another person, did not need warmth that wasn't earned. And every achievement I placed on the altar was an offering. Every performance was a sacrifice. Every moment of excellence was me trying to make the altar holy enough that its protection would be permanent safety. That's what I was buying with all of it. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't have seen from inside the building, was that the altar required endless sacrifice, that no achievement would ever be the last one needed, that the protection it offered was real but temporary and always demanding the next offering, that what I was calling ambition was partly, legitimately, the drive of a curious and capable person who wanted to build things. And it was also partly a way of never having to stop and ask, is this actually enough? Am I actually enough? Would someone stay if I had nothing to offer? I never asked. I just kept building. Look at me for a second. What are you building? Not professionally, not strategically. I mean, in the quiet center of your life, what is the thing you are constructing? What is the architecture of your safety? What is the structure you are maintaining that is supposed to prove something to yourself, to the people who taught you what safety cost, to the world that you decided early needed to be convinced? What is the offering you keep placing on the altar, and when does it stop? At what level of achievement will you allow yourself to be known? At what point will you decide the wall has done its job and it can come down? How impressive do you have to become before you believe that someone would stay if they saw the real version? I am asking you to hear this. The number you're calculating does not exist. There is no achievement that makes intimacy safe. There is no level of performance that earns the right to be known. There is no accomplishment that retrofits you with the ability to receive love you never learned to receive as a child. The work is different. The work is smaller and harder and more daily than building an empire. The work is choosing, in ordinary moments, to be a little more honest than is comfortable, to ask for something instead of managing without, to stay in the uncertainty instead of sprinting toward resolution, to let someone be close instead of letting them be near. She changed me. I want to say that clearly, but I want to say it the right way. She didn't change me by being exceptional, though she is. She didn't change me by loving me so powerfully that my defenses collapsed. She didn't have a magic quality that uniquely dissolved what I had built. She changed me by being consistently present and consistently honest over time, without an agenda about what I was supposed to become. She just kept showing up as herself, clear, warm, grounded, honest, not performing anything, not needing me to perform anything back. Just two people over time building something real, and in proximity to her realness, my performance started to feel expensive in a new way. Not because she criticized it, she didn't, but because next to something genuine, the manufactured thing reveals itself. The managed version of a person, next to someone who is simply and fully themselves, starts to feel like effort that could be released. I started letting things be real, not all at once, not beautifully, not without regression, without nights where I rebuilt the wall faster than I had taken it down, without conversations where I retreated into management and optimization because the openness scared me, But over time, genuinely, over time, here's what I learned about the difference between a house and a home. I had built a house. The house was impressive. The house was structurally sound, beautifully appointed, expertly maintained. The house said everything about the quality of my judgment and the discipline of my execution. The house was cold, not metaphorically cold, not poetically cold, functionally actually cold, the kind of cold that comes from a space that has been perfected but not inhabited, the kind of cold that comes from optimizing for impression rather than living. A home is built differently. A home is built out of the things you stop being ashamed of, out of the meals that didn't turn out of the conversations that went somewhere unexpected, out of the Saturday mornings with no agenda, out of the inside jokes that require too much context to explain to outsiders, out of crying in front of someone and having them stay, out of being uncertain in front of someone and being met with curiosity instead of disappointment. A home is built out of presence, shared presence, the accumulating, unremarkable, irreplaceable presence of two people choosing every day to continue. I had been building houses my whole life. Beautiful, cold houses. I wanted to build a home. Wait, before you scroll, I know some of you are listening to this and feeling it in a place you normally guard, and the instinct is going to be to dismiss it when it's over, to say that was interesting and move on, to file it under content and continue. Don't do that. Sit with this for a moment. Just a moment, because whatever moved in you while you listened, that movement was real. That wasn't manufactured by production value or emotional music. That was you recognizing something. That was the part of you that knows the performance is costing you something, responding to the sound of something honest. That recognition is information. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a signal to be followed. What does the signal say? Tell me something who in your life knows the version that comes after the managed version. Who have you let into the cold places? Who has been invited past the performance, past the competence, past the always moving forward surface of you, into the room where you haven't figured it out yet? If the answer is no one, I want you to hear me when I say that is not your personality. That is a decision made for protection that is no longer serving you the way it once did. If the answer is her, if there is someone in your life who has been patient with your walls, who has stayed through the performances, who has kept showing up honestly and warmly and without agenda, I want you to hear me when I say let her in, not in some grand gesture, not in a dramatic moment of revelation. Just tomorrow, tell her something true that you would normally manage. Stay in it. Don't walk it back. See what she does. I believe she'll stay. Here's what I learned about collapse. The night in the hotel room. The nothing, the flat white nothing. I thought at the time was a low point. I thought it was a warning, a signal to recalibrate and build better systems and push more strategically towards something that would generate meaning. I was wrong. The collapse was not the problem. The collapse was the mercy, because everything I had built on the wrong foundation was going to have to come apart eventually. The wall was going to have to come down. The performance was going to become unsustainable. The altar was going to demand more than I could give. And the only question was whether the collapse would happen from the outside, catastrophically, publicly, past the point of choice, or from the inside, quietly, with enough space to ask what it was trying to say. The nothing in the hotel room was the inside collapse, the mercy, the invitation. The emptiness was not an ending. The emptiness was finally enough room to hear what had been trying to speak for 20 years. The emptiness was the question, what would you build if you were building for life instead of proof? What would you build? Not for the resume. Not for the story you tell at the table when people ask what you do. Not for the version of yourself that needs to be defended, maintained, performed. What would you build if you were building for something that lasts, for something that holds warmth, for something you could come home to fully without the performance, tired, uncertain, alive, complicated, real? I started answering that question differently after the hotel room. Not immediately, not cleanly, with a great deal of backsliding and renegotiation and grief for the version of myself I had been so loyal to for so long. Grief, yes, because dismantling what you built from fear, even when you know it was built from fear, is a loss. The performance was also a companion. The wall was also a comfort. Letting them go is not simple, even when it is necessary, but I started choosing differently, in the small daily ways that are actually the only ways that change happens. I started arriving instead of performing. Arriving, just actually being where I was instead of being where I was, while simultaneously monitoring how I was landing, how I was being perceived, whether the version I was presenting was adequate. I started asking instead of managing. Asking what someone needed instead of preemptively solving. Asking for what I needed instead of converting the need into an action item. I started staying in discomfort, in uncertainty, in the middle of the conversation that wasn't resolving cleanly. Instead of moving toward resolution the way I would move toward a target, I started letting her see me without the edit, not perfectly, not consistently, but more and more often, And each time the world continued, each time she stayed, each time what I feared would cost me something gave me something instead. And here is where the foundation metaphor completes. What I had built before was impressive but not load-bearing in the ways that matter. It was built on the premise that my value was conditional, that love was something you earned through performance, that need was dangerous, that being known was risk. Those were the stones. Every achievement was laid on top of them. The new foundation is different. The new foundation is I am allowed to be known. I am allowed to need things. I am allowed to be uncertain, to be tired, to be the one who needs something tonight instead of the one who provides everything always. I am allowed to be in the middle of something, unresolved, still be worth someone's time. Love is not something you earn. It is something you receive when you finally, terrifyingly, stop making yourself impossible to give it to. That is the foundation. Everything built on top of it feels different, lighter and more solid at once, the paradox of things that are actually sound. It holds in ways the old construction never held, and it holds her in it, and that changes everything. Look at me for a second. You have been performing for a long time. You have been excellent for a long time. You have been taking care of things, yourself included, in a manner of speaking, the practical things, the forward-moving things. For a long time, you are allowed to be taken care of. You are allowed to let someone see the version that doesn't have a strategy yet. You are allowed to arrive at someone's door without an agenda, without something to offer, without being in motion. You are allowed to sit with someone in the quiet and let the quiet be enough, and let them be enough, and let yourself be enough. You are allowed to be home. She will not complete you. Let me say this one more time because it is important. She will not complete you. And the story that tells you she should is one of the most corrosive stories in our culture. The people we love are not completion. They are companions. They walk alongside. They are present. They hold space. They offer honesty. They stay. They do not fix the wound. They sit beside you while you do the work of healing it. And their presence, steady, warm, consistent, true, makes the work survivable in a way that doing it alone does not. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. The work is yours. The choice to begin it is yours. The daily practice of choosing presence over performance, vulnerability over management, reality over impression, that is yours every morning without exception. But you do not have to do it in an empty hotel room. Don't deny it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You knew it from the first few sentences. You recognize the hotel room even if yours look different. You recognize the nothing. You recognize the performance. You recognize the wall and the altar and the endless maintenance and the exhaustion in the place that rest doesn't reach. You recognized it because you live it, because you have been living it, because some part of you has been waiting, not for rescue, you're too practical for rescue, but for permission to stop, permission to need, permission to be the version of yourself that hasn't been impressive since childhood and never entirely recovered from learning that unimpressive was unsafe. I am giving you that permission for whatever it is worth coming from someone who needed it themselves. Stop, not permanently, not as a surrender, just long enough to hear what has been trying to speak. Let her in. If she is someone worth letting in, and you know the difference, you have always known the difference, let her in, not all at once, not perfectly, just more than yesterday. Just one true thing that you would normally manage. Let the wall come down one brick at a time. The collapse was the mercy. The nothing was the invitation. The emptiness was finally enough room, and what grew in the room was not what I would have predicted. Not a better system, not an improved strategy, not a more optimized version of the performing man, but something quieter and more astonishing. Something that felt for the first time since I was very young and had not yet learned that feeling was risk, like being alive, like actually fully groundedly alive, like home. Tell me something. What are you waiting for?